Hey, what's up everybody? This is Brick501 and today I want to go over a ton of new potential leaks for Diablo 4. Now first I want to quickly go over some cinematic and cutscene leaks we recently got that showed very early versions of some in-game cutscenes and some more higher quality cinematics. Now I can't show you any of that. I don't even know if any of that is still around because anybody who posted it on YouTube or any other sites were getting copyright strike, and that was pretty obvious that would happen. These leaks were like first drafts of these cutscenes and even some mocap footage, so incredibly early stuff that usually nobody outside the development team would ever be seeing. Some of it did look pretty cool because a few of them were a little bit further along in development, but that's pretty much all the leaks we got with those cinematics. Now the much more interesting possible leaks I want to go over is a recent Reddit post that has a bunch of information that is said to have been leaked from the friends and family beta tests that have been going on for a while. Now, if you don't know what those are, Blizzard and a lot of other game companies will usually have friends and family tests that aren't publicly announced, aren't publicly shown. This is pretty much just more internal stuff to where they can get a lot more people into early versions of the game to test them. And sometimes you will get some leaks from these tests. Now this post doesn't have any way to verify this information, but I will say some of this information has been leaked in the past from family and friendly tests. We have heard a little bit of this information before, and even specifically when we got a bunch of leaked screenshots that I went over before, there was also some of this information with that. So some of this does seem to be a bit accurate, but just a disclaimer, with all leaks, take this stuff with a grain of salt because this stuff could just be fake or it could be changed by the time the game is released, but a lot of this information is pretty interesting nonetheless. Now first off, we have trading, so it will be very limited and you won't be able to trade rare, legendary, set, and unique items along with gold. Rare items have been tradable early in this phase of the beta, but since it leads to some of the most powerful items when rolled properly in conjunction with giving them legendary power, they are now untradeable. The main reason why Blizzard does not want free trading, according to the leaker, is because trading does not make the gameplay better, along with numerous other problems it brings. Blizzard is working on ways to make the game more social without the need for trading. Now, very early on when Diablo 4 was revealed, they also gave kind of a hint to what they want to do with trading. They said they want the highest tier items not being tradable, but the more mid-tier items to be very rarely tradable, and then low tier items to just be freely tradable. And that was also the sentiment when we went over those last leaks. You could trade everything below rare an infinite amount of times. You could trade rare items a few times, and you couldn't trade legendary, set, or unique items. Now, as a lot of people have discussed, and I'm pretty sure I discussed this in that video, is that rare items are probably going to be the strongest items in Diablo 4. If they were going with that philosophy, it really wouldn't make sense for rare items to be tradable, but legendary, set, and unique items to not be, because rare items are going to turn out to be better than most legendary items because you can just take that legendary effect and put it on the rare item, making that rare base item the best in slot for that build. So it seems like they're removing rare out of being able to be traded, which essentially kind of kills trading. Even if you'd be able to trade like rare items like once or very rarely, trading wouldn't be that big of a thing. And trading seems to be something that the developers don't really want to be a big part of Diablo 4 at all. Again, I'm not someone that cares about trading much at all. I probably wouldn't be doing much, if any, trading anyway, so it seems that is the direction they're going with this. Next up, some information on Smart Loot. This feature will be making a return, which we've talked about before, but you will still be able to find godly items for other classes as well. It might be 85 to 15% split like in Diablo 3, though numbers might not be final. So Smart Loot is essentially where most of your drops will be something usable for your class. Like mentioned here in Diablo 3, I think it's an 85% chance to get items for your class and a 15% chance to get items for other classes. And it seems like as of right now in these tests, that is where they're sitting for Diablo 4, but obviously these numbers could be pretty heavily changed before release. Now, something to note with a system like this, you obviously still have that 15% chance to get items for other classes, but also most items, unless they have a class specific role on them, are pretty much usable between all the different classes. Like if you get a belt with like a main stat and like 4 affixes on it or something like that, that could pretty much be used for any class if there's not a class specific stat stat on it. And with how primary stats are working in Diablo 4, any primary stat can be useful for most classes. They're somewhat useful for every class, but most classes will also get more benefit from that primary stat. So even if it goes live with this smart loot split, a lot more of the items you get will be useful for other classes than the split would suggest. And this goes along with the next bit of information, which is drop rates. This will be nothing like Diablo 3. The reigning legendary / set item system is gone. The godlike items in Diablo 4 will be somewhat close to Diablo 2 godly drop rates. Since there is smart loot though, it's much more likely that you will get those items for your class when they drop. This is a happy medium between Diablo 2's super rare drops and Diablo 3's smart loot. And I think that is an area that is kind of being targeted for a lot of Diablo 4, being a kind of middle ground between Diablo 2's much more old school design and Diablo 3's much less complex design, and kind of sitting more in the middle with still having a lot of the more kind of gameplay first type of features, but a lot of the complexity of Diablo 2 or other more complex ARPGs. And I do think making it harder to get legendary items, set items, and having these super rare godly drops is just generally going to be a really good thing for the game. And then smart loot on top of that will allow any time you get these ultra rare drops to give them a much higher chance to be actually for your class. And that is something that I've seen with a lot of people criticizing smart loot, is that you'll just be getting really good drops super early on and gearing will be super quickly, which really doesn't make sense. They can just tune loot to be lower. It can still be the same chance to get a super good item, but when you get that item, it's a much higher chance to be specifically for the class you're playing on. Like mentioned in this, I think this system is really good. I think this is probably the best way they can go for an ARPG being released in 2023. And next up, we have something a little bit different, which is gambling. This feature is coming back and will be slightly different than Diablo 2. Gold is going to be much more useful since your gold is uncapped. You don't need to manage it like in Diablo 2. You can also pay gamblers extra gold for a high chance to get powerful items. In addition to that, you can sell unidentified items to the gambler for much higher prices than if you had identified that item. It depends on the quality of the item itself, and those prices will obviously depend on the quality of the item. Selling unneeded items is very useful to get extra gold, while it's useless to do so in Diablo 3, so selling unneeded items is going to be useful to get extra gold, unlike Diablo 3 where it's pretty much useless. So if you don't know what they mean by gambling, in a lot of ARPGs, Path of Exile, Diablo 2, Last Epoch, pretty much all these games have a vendor you can go to that will have a bunch of randomized items, usually show like a belt or a specific weapon type or a specific armor type, and it's random. You'll just buy this item and then it'll essentially random roll you an item. And this is something that a lot of these games add essentially to allow you to spend built up currency for just additional item rolls. And it seems like they're expanding on that a little bit. So gold in general is going to be much more useful, which is really good. When you have a main currency that becomes basically useless, that's never really a good thing. I think that's what it's generally like in Diablo 3, where gold is just kind of not useful. So having a really good use for it is nice. And then having these extra ways to interact with the gambler. So if you have unidentified items, maybe you know that slot or that item type or that type of belt is not going to be useful for your build. You're not looking for anything for that. You could sell that unidentified item to that vendor and get a lot more gold than if you just identified it and then sold it to that gambler, which will then allow you to just gamble more items to try to get the rolls you're looking for a little bit more. Generally a pretty good system to add into these type of games, and I think a lot of people like this, and this is something that you would usually expect to be in a lot of ARPGs. And next up, we have some information on crafting and gathering. This system is getting updated heavily from Diablo 3. There are numerous resources you can find in the world to collect, and it takes almost no time to gather them, so it won't slow down combat very much. Crafting items include potions, gems, weapon and armor, and certain rare materials that can modify your gear. Some are found from monsters, others in gathering. So gatherable resources were something that were shown, I think, at the first BlizzCon that Diablo 4 was revealed. I'm pretty sure there were gatherable resources in that first demo. And if this information is true, it seems like they're expanding on that system and trying to add a little bit more of that gathering and crafting in Diablo 4. So there will be gatherable resources all over the world map. It'll take a very little amount of time to gather these, so you're not having to stop 3 seconds or more between nodes like something that would happen in full-scale MMOs. Instead, it's very quick, so you can keep going along with the combat, but still get those resources when you run into them. And also some resources will be specifically found from monsters you're slaying, so you'll still be able to earn resources just from killing enemies. And you'll be using these to craft your potions, your gems, weapons, and armor, and then some other resources that modify your gear. So there's going to be a good chunk of crafting in the game, which I think is generally something that's pretty good. Crafting usually ends up being a failsafe or bad luck protection to allow you to get items that you may have not been able to obtain as just a drop from enemies or chests. And then finally, we have some information on SSF, which is solo self-found. Now, this is essentially a different type of game mode that a lot of RPGs allow you to play on, where you can't trade items and you're only solo, so no grouping. So this mode has been debated by Blizzard's team, and it will 100% not be coming to Diablo 4. They would have to release numerous modes for it, and since there is no free trade, it's just redundant to have it. Blizzard wants to avoid splitting the player base up. This is exactly what I would expect. If you don't have fully free trading, SSF really doesn't make sense. And keep in mind, we already know there's going to be just normal play and then hardcore, which is where your character is permanently dead when it dies. So adding in any additional game modes on top of that, like SSF, you would have to add SSF normal and then SSF hardcore. So adding in any additional way to play, you now have to add in 2 modes of that, just multiplying how split up the player base is going to be. And they're making Diablo 4 as a shared world experience. So not wanting to heavily split up your player base is probably going to be their best bet. And again, I don't think they need something like SSF. Without fully free trading, this mode just truly doesn't make any sense. So this is all the new possible leaked information we have gotten. Like I mentioned before, take all of this with a grain of salt. This stuff could just be fake or could be heavily changed before the game is fully released. But like I also mentioned, some of this information we have gotten in previous credible leaks, and a lot of this information is kind of just building off of their philosophies that we've heard over the course of the game development. Like specifically with trading, this follows their philosophy from when the game was originally revealed. They're just adding in that you can't trade rares because of them changing the legendary system that essentially makes rare items all have the potential to be legendary as well. So that makes sense. And a lot of the other information is just more specific information on systems you would expect to be in the game. And generally, I like pretty much all these systems. Trading, I don't really care either way. I think a big reason they don't want trading is it generally causes some light pay to win issues, and they would probably want most, if not all, the gear you're wearing to be stuff you went out and found, instead of just farming up a currency and then buying a really good item from a forum or something like that. Smart loot, I fully expected to be in the game. I'm a fan of smart loot, like I've mentioned before. If it's something like 85-15, which they're mentioning is the percentage right now, to where most of the loot you're getting is stuff that's actually usable for your class, but you still have a lower chance to still get items for other classes. Drop rates being more rare to get these high tier items, having super godly drop rates. I think having that chance to get just a godly rolled item is something that should be in every ARPG. I think Diablo 3 really doesn't have this, but something like Path of Exile definitely has this, where there's just those super rare items that when you get, you're going to be hyped to get and that are going to be incredibly strong. These slight changes to the gambling system seem pretty cool. And then the crafting and gathering definitely seems like something they would want to add in a more shared world experience. Having a little bit of gathering thrown in and then having a bit more of an emphasis on crafting is always going to be a good thing. Like I mentioned, crafting ends up just being a bad luck protection and gives you more deterministic ways to create your build. But that's pretty much all I want to go over with these potential leaks. So subscribe if you want to see more Diablo 4 or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Comment down below what you guys think about all these leaks, and thanks for watching.